Okay, so we're doing body fluids in the acid-base chapter now. So first off, total body water is going to be a function of your age, your body mass, and the amount of body fat you have. There's going to be more fat in men, there's going to be more water in men in general, and there's going to be less water in women. Why? In general, men are larger than women. With our fluid compartments, you're going to have intracellular fluid, so that would be like your cytoplasm. You'll have your extracellular fluid, so that would be like your blood plasma and the interstitial fluid, the fluid that all your cells are soaking in. So when you get like a nice juicy steak, that juice is going to be the interstitial fluid. In the composition of it, you'll have electrolytes, which are going to be ions that dissociate in water, and non-electrolytes, which are going to be mostly organic compounds. And what's going to move stuff, we talked about this before, osmotic and hydrostatic pressures. So osmotic pressures are going to help to move fluids, and that's going to be caused by proteins or dissolved solutes. And hydrostatic pressure is going to be more of an active pressure, and it's going to help move solutes. So about 60% of your body weight's water. 40% of your body weight is going to be intracellular fluid or cytoplasm, and about 20% of your body weight is going to be extracellular fluid. Most of that's interstitial fluid, and then a little bit of it's going to be plasma. So with our body fluids, check this out. Check out the how much sodium or potassium or proteins you find and stuff. So with our blood plasma and interstitial fluids, there's going to be tons of sodium in it. Okay, within the cells, there's going to be tons of potassium in them. Okay, once again, within the blood and plasma and interstitial fluids, we get tons of chloride. And within the cells, we're going to get tons of HPO4 and proteins. Okay, so mixing of fluids. The gist of it is the fluids go intracellular, so they're within the cell. They could go interstitial, so they're going to go in the interstitium, and they're going to go in the plasma. So I eat something. It comes into my digestive tract. I absorb it into the cells. It has to pass through my interstitial space, so my basement membrane, and then it'll go into the plasma. Okay, it'll go into the blood vessels. It goes from my blood vessels, it'll pass through the cells of my blood vessels, and it'll pass through the basement membrane again, which is the interstitial fluid, and it'll go into cells, so intercellular fluid. Okay, so like with the lungs, we breathe in air, oxygen goes into the lungs, it passes through the type 1 alveolar cells. The oxygen is actually within the cell, so it's intracellular. Then it passes through that basement membrane, so that's the interstitium, and then it'll pass into the capillary cell, and then into the blood vessel. So once it's in the blood vessel, it's in the plasma. Alright, with the water balance in our body, the gist of it is the amount of water you take in per day is going to be about equal to the amount of water you output a day. The different ways we get water into our body are, some of it's metabolism, so your body makes its own water. Some of it's going to be food stuff, so you're eating foods. And the rest of it's mostly going to be beverages, so that's going to be about 60% is beverages. If you notice, the amount of urine you produce is quite similar to the amount of beverages you intake, and all the other stuff kind of matches metabolism and foods. So you lose about 4% in feces, 2% in sweat, and you lose 28% via skin and lungs. So how's our water regulation input work? So let's start off here. I'm going to get the highlighter so you can watch where I'm going step by step. So first off, you get dry mouth. Alright, or let's start off here. First off, you're going to get increased plasma osmolarity, so there's less water in the plasma, and you're going to get decreased plasma volume. First we'll follow the plasma osmolarity. With that, we're going to get decreased saliva, which causes dry mouth, which will go up to our hypothalamic thirst center and start the cascade. Our osmoreceptors in the hypothalamus will go up to the hypothalamic thirst center and start the cascade. Alright? With the decreased plasma volume, we'll have a decrease in blood pressure, which will go up to to the hypothalamic thirst center and down this cascade. Alright? Granular cells in the kidneys. Okay, those guys will be checking our blood pressure. Those will be mechanoreceptors in the afferent arteriole heading to the glomerulus. We'll activate our renin-angiotensin mechanism, and we'll release angiotensin 2, and we'll go up and activate the hypothalamic thirst center. So what happens when we activate this hypothalamic thirst center? You get thirsty. So what do? You take a drink of water. Alright, you get thirsty. You take a drink of water, it moistens the mouth and the throat, and it stretches the intestines and the stomach. Alright? Water is absorbed in the GI tract, and you decrease osmolarity of the plasma, and what that'll do is that'll inhibit your thirst. Okay, so we'll go through some hormones. First hormone, ADH. ADH is going to increase reabsorption of water in the collecting duct. Alright, so if we increase plasma osmolarity of sodium, osmoreceptors in the hypothalamus pick up on that. Posterior pituitary releases ADH. Alright, ADH will go to the collecting ducts and it'll increase the reabsorption of water. What happens? We decrease plasma osmolarity, increase plasma volume, and we satisfy these guys and they stop this whole cascade. Other result from here, if we increase reabsorption of water, you have less urine production. So reabsorption, that's going to be moving a fluid from the nephron into the blood. So we're keeping fluid in the body. We reabsorb it. Okay, so dehydration, hypotonic hydration, and edema. Okay, so here's what happens with dehydration. You're losing more water than you're taking in. So excessive loss of water from the extracellular fluid is going to cause the osmotic pressure in the extracellular fluid to rise, which means the cells will lose their fluid and they will dehydrate and they will crenulate and they can die. So if you don't have water, you can die. Hypotonic hydration, you're taking in too much water. The osmotic pressure in the extracellular fluid increases, and it increases so much that the cells can't keep up with it, and they start increasing in size because osmosis is causing the water to flow in. Alright? And then edema. That's going to be its own thing. So with edemas, we're going to have injury to an area, or we'll have an event occur in an area, and you'll release proteins which will cause increased osmotic pressure on the outside in the extracellular fluid, and we'll get fluid accumulation there though. It'll just be local. Alright? The electrolyte balances, the most important thing is sodium, and as we heard in the renal chapter, where sodium goes, water follows. Alright? So if we can control our sodium levels, we can control our blood pressure and our blood volume. Next one is aldosterone. So aldosterone is going to increase the reabsorption of sodium in the distal collecting duct. So here's what happens. If we get increased potassium or decreased sodium in our plasma, what's going to happen is the adrenal cortex is going to pick up on this. Or we get activation of the renin-angiotensin mechanism. We tell the adrenal cortex, release aldosterone. Aldosterone goes to the distal convolute tubule, and it's going to tell it increase reabsorption of sodium, increase secretion of potassium. Bring sodium into the blood, put potassium into the urine. Alright? And then we start going back to our normal levels of sodium potassium. Okay, so let's look at a big picture here. Declining systemic blood pressure or blood volume. So if our blood pressure decreases, we have less stretch on the afferent arterioles heading to the glomerulus. We have decreased filtrate sodium chloride in the ascending limb of Henle. Alright? So what's going to happen? Our granular cells are going to release renin. Okay? Renin does the angiotensin 1, and then we have ACE from the lungs, angiotensin converting enzyme from the lungs, which will convert angiotensin 1 to 2. Our angiotensin 2 does a couple things. It tells the systemic arterioles to vasoconstrict, and that increases peripheral resistance, which causes an increased blood pressure. Alright? Next, we're going to have the release of aldosterone, which tells us to reabsorb sodium. Alright? And we're going to reabsorb water. And then we're going to increase our blood volume. What will that do? Increase blood pressure. Okay? Next, if we have baroreceptors in the blood vessels, alright, we're going to get a sympathetic response. What does that do? It tells our granular cells release renin. What else does it do? It tells our systemic arterioles to vasoconstrict, and it increases blood pressure. Okay. Next effect of angiotensin II is going to tell the posterior pituitary to release antidiuretic hormone, which tells us to reabsorb water in the collecting ducts. So all together we increase blood volume. How? We reabsorb water, we reabsorb sodium. Then here's our outlier, our atrionatriuretic peptide, ANP. So ANP is going to inhibit the release of ADH and renin and aldosterone. So if blood pressure is rising, you have increased stretch of the atria due to increased blood pressure, we release ANP. Let's start here. It tells the juxtaglomerular apparatus cells to stop releasing renin, which decreases angiotensin, and it causes generalized vasodilation. Alright, with the decreased renin, we get less water and sodium reabsorption. Next, we inhibit the release of ADH, which has us reabsorb less water. And next, we decrease the release of aldosterone, which gives us less water and sodium reabsorption. And then we decrease our blood volume, which ends up with decreased blood pressure. Some other things, you can have female hormones like estrogens and progesterones, kind of like for females. When you are going through your cycle, you bloat once a month. Alright, so that's going to deal with our hormones. We'll talk more about that next chapter though. Okay, so with our acid-base balance, the big influencer of our acid-base balance is going to be your hydrogen ion concentration. The more hydrogen ion concentration you get, the more acidic you get. So you go to a lower number. You go from 7 closer to 1. Alright? The less of these you get, the more basic you get. So your number increases. So alkalosis would be if your blood pH is above 7.45. Acidosis is if your blood pH is below 7.35. So we're going to have our acid-base buffer systems here. We'll have our bicarbonate buffer system, our phosphate buffer system, and our protein buffer system. We're also going to have our respiratory and renal mechanisms. These guys will connect right up with our bicarbonate buffer system. The only one I'm going to take time to talk about right now is going to be this bicarbonate. So here's the gist of it. If I'm increasing my metabolic activity and I'm not breathing heavier, I'm going to increase the amount of carbon dioxide floating around in my blood. If I increase the amount of carbon dioxide floating around in my blood, we activate this system. So carbon dioxide mixes with water, that will turn into carbonic acid. Carbonic acid will dissociate and turn into H plus and HCO3. As it dissociates there, H plus levels go high and our pH begins to drop, so we become more acidic, our blood. So how can we affect this? The ways we can affect this are, I can breathe off carbon dioxide in my lungs, I can secrete bicarbonate, and I can reabsorb or produce bicarbonate. Sorry, I can secrete H plus, and I can reabsorb or produce bicarbonate. Alright. If for some reason my blood is getting too alkaline, I decrease respiratory rate and I let carbon dioxide build up, and then that is going to combine with water, make carbonic acid, and dissociate here. Alright. What we'll do is we'll reabsorb H plus and secrete bicarbonate. Okay. So when acidic bicarbonate ions bind to excess H plus, we form carbonic acid. So we can go either way. This equation can go to the right or it can go to the left. It's reversible is what that's called. So bicarbonate concentrations can be regulated by the kidneys, by controlling the extracellular fluid, or it could be controlled by the respiratory system in the plasma. So here's some nice flow charts. I want you to use these flow charts in your study guide. Okay, so if alkalosis occurs, you get decreased respiration, CO2 accumulates, we increase our H plus ion concentration and decrease our pH. We become more acidic. If acidosis occurs, you increase respiratory rate, you breathe faster, we get rid of CO2, we decrease the H plus ion concentration, and we increase the pH. We become more alkaline. Our other buffer systems, phosphates and proteins. Okay, with the respiratory regulation, carbon dioxide can convert to bicarb, and it can transport in the, and then we can and it can transport in the plasma. All right. So blood pH drops, we activate the medullary respiratory centers, and you breathe heavier. Okay, as you breathe heavier, we remove carbon dioxide and we shift the equation this way. So H plus combines with bicarbonate, and we're going to move this way. Okay, we decrease the amount of H plus rising around. If pH rises, CO2 accumulates, this increases, it combines with water, turns into carbonic acid, and slides this way. So we're going to drop the pH and become more acidic. Okay, with our renal system, your renal system is going to have a couple ways it can do it. It can conserve bicarbonate. Alright, so if you get acidosis, we can conserve bicarbonate so we can reabsorb it. It can synthesize new bicarbonate, and it can secrete H plus. Alright, if it becomes too alkaline, bicarbonate's not going to be secreted, and we're going to reabsorb H plus. So we bring H plus back into the blood. If it's acidic, we get rid of H plus out of the blood, and we get bicarbonate into the blood. Okay, so this picture is not very bad. Just read the numbers and follow along. I'm just going to read it to you because it does a nice job explaining it here. So carbon dioxide and water combine in the kidney tubule. So first off, this is going to be the lumen, this is going to be proximal convoluted tubule cells, and this is going to be a peritubular capillary. So carbon dioxide and water combine in the kidney tubule. They form carbonic acid. It can go right or it can go left. If it goes left, H plus will go into the urine. If it goes right, bicarbonate will go into the blood. Alright, so H plus goes into the filtrate lumen. H plus in the filtrate lumen is going, so it's secreted. It's going to combine with HCO3. We form our carbonic acid again, and it dissociates into water and carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide comes back into the tubule, okay, and it can either go across into the blood, or it can combine with excess water, become carbonic acid, send bicarbonate to the blood, H plus to the kidneys, and start all over again. Alright, for each H plus that is secreted, we reabsorb a bicarbonate, so it's a bifold effect there. That's it.